Hi, welcome back to Granny Charlotte's Adventure Stories. Today we're reading Chapter 12 of Little Pilgrim's Progress. And always, we have vocabulary words. Today we're going to go over a word that we did last time. We didn't actually use the word last time, so we're going to say it again today because it's in our reading. And that word is riot. Riot means when a group of people behave in a violent way, they get mad, they get mean, and sometimes they lose control of their feelings. They get very angry as a group. Riot. Our other word is vanity. Vanity is when a person thinks of themselves a lot. So much that they are overly concerned about how they look. They might think they're a little special. They might think they're better than other people. They might like all the stuff they have and think everything they own is better. Vanity. All right, let's get to reading. You know that the wicked prince hated the good king who ruled over the celestial city, and it made him very angry to see the pilgrims on their way from his country to that of the king. He had built this city, which was called Vanity Fair, just beyond the dark valley and the wilderness, because he knew that when the pilgrims reached its gates, they would be feeling tired and faint, and he hoped that it would then be easy to persuade them to stay there instead of going farther on the way of the king. So he filled the great city with everything that was pleasant and beautiful. It had broad streets and handsome houses, and the stalls in its market were covered with glittering wares. All day long, the people were passing busily up and down. They wore fine clothes and spent their whole time in pleasing themselves, and the wicked prince took care to give them plenty of things to enjoy, so that they might never have a moment to spare in which to think of the king whom they had forsaken. After they had lived in Vanity Fair for a short time, most of the pilgrims forgot the king altogether. And when they saw other pilgrims passing on their way to the celestial city, they were ready to help the servants of the wicked prince in persuading the travelers to give up their journey. I couldn't find a really good picture of Vanity Fair, so the best thing I came up with was this picture of a carnival, where there's all sorts of fun things to do, keep you very busy, take you on rides, show you glittery things. That's our representation of Vanity Fair. But what do you think about it in your mind? What kind of city do you see? It was dark when our two little pilgrims entered the town, so they stayed quietly in a sheltered corner near the gate until the next morning. As soon as the sun rose, they began their walk through the city, for they thought that if they started early, they might perhaps reach the opposite gate before the streets became crowded with people. But little Christian's bright armor and the white suit that Faithful wore were not like the dress of the children in the Vanity Fair. And the boys had only gone a very short distance before they were noticed by some lads who were strolling idly about. "There are two little pilgrims," they cried. "Let's go after them and stop them." Christian and Faithful could hear the boys running behind them, but they did not look around. "Don't let us take any notice," said Christian. "Perhaps they will just speak to us." But when the boys came up, they all gathered closely round the little pilgrims and would not let them pass. "Tell us where you have come from," said one. "And who gave you that armor and those white clothes?" cried another. "Why don't you look at the shops?" said a third. "Boys like you don't want swords and shields. You should sell them and buy some of these beautiful things." Christian scarcely knew what to say, for the boys were all speaking at once, and he felt quite confused. But little Faithful answered bravely, "We don't wish for any of your things. We're going to the celestial city." Then the boys laughed rudely and one of them pushed Faithful so that he would have fallen if he had not been holding Christian's hand. By this time, many other children had run toward them, and some other people stopped also to see what was the matter. Then one of the wicked prince's servants passed by, and when he saw Christian's shining helmet, he knew that the boys must be pilgrims. So he pushed his way through the crowd and seized them both by their shoulders. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Our prince does not allow children to quarrel in his streets." "We are not quarreling," said Christian. "We were just walking along quietly." "That is nonsense," replied the man. "You have caused all this crowd and disturbance. You must come with me." "We are the king's pilgrims," said Faithful. "We are not disturbing anybody. We only wish to pass through the city." "I don't know anything about the king's pilgrims," answered the man. "I can see that you are two foolish, troublesome boys, and you must be taken before the governor." So he led them both down the street to the governor's house, and the children of the town followed, laughing and mocking at the poor little pilgrims whom they had brought into such trouble. The governor of the city was one of the wicked prince's chief servants, and he hated the king and his pilgrims almost as much as his master did. When Faithful and little Christian were brought before him, he was quite glad to think that he had an excuse for hurting someone whom the king loved, and he said, "You are two very bad boys, and you must both be beaten, and afterward you shall be shut up in the iron cage, so that the children of the town may see you and know what will be done to them if they follow your example." It was no use for the little pilgrims to say anything. The tears came into Christian's eyes when he heard the governor's cruel words, and he wondered whether his mother would know what was happening to him. Faithful's cheeks grew very white, and he could hardly whisper to Christian, "Evangelist said that they might hurt us, but if we die, we shall go straight to the celestial city. I shall think of the king, because he is sure to help me. I will not cry." Then Christian determined to be brave too, and he remembered the picture he had seen in the house of the interpreter of the good shepherd whose feet were torn and bleeding. "He is our prince," thought Christian, and he did not mind the pain. I must not either, because I am the king's servant, and it is written in my book that the king's servants are to be like the prince. And though the strokes of the heavy rod made his back and arms feel terribly sore and bruised and bleeding, he behaved like a brave soldier and did not cry at all. The iron cage was a place in the middle of the market with bars of iron in front of it so that it looked like a den for wild beasts. After they had been severely beaten, the little pilgrims had chains fastened upon their hands and feet, and then the man who had charge of them put them into the cage and left them there. Here's a picture of a man in an iron cage a long, long time ago, and that is what they used to do to people, sometimes in the middle of the cities. That is a bad place to be. They could not stand upright, for they were ill and weak with pain, so they sat down together upon the ground, and each tried to comfort the other by reminding him of the king's promises. "We knew that they would be cruel," said Faithful, "but it is for the king's sake, and he will not let them hurt us too much." When the people in the town heard that two of the king's pilgrims were lying in the cage, they were very eager to see them. And soon a crowd of rude boys and girls, and men and women also, gathered around to stare at Faithful and Christian and to mock them in their trouble. The boys of Vanity Fair said all kinds of cruel things to provoke the pilgrims and to make them displease the king by being angry with their enemies. But Christian and Faithful sat still and neither of them gave a cross answer to anything that was said. At last, some of the boys, when they saw how patient the little pilgrims were, began to feel ashamed, and they cried out, "Let them alone now! They have been beaten, and it is brave of them not to cry. Don't tease them any more." But the other boys were cruel and liked to see the white faces and trembling lips of the poor little pilgrims. So they went on teasing them and laughing at them until their companions grew angry, and before long there was a great disturbance in the market, for the boys who were sorry for the pilgrims began to fight with those who were teasing them. The governor was obliged to send his men to stop the fighting, and he ordered Christian and Faithful to be beaten once more, because he said the riot had been on their account. Then they were taken back to the cage, where they lay all night in great pain and distress. And that concludes our reading for today. This is pretty serious, where we've left little Christian and Faithful. Well, even now, it's still time for you to wash your hands, brush your teeth, and today I'm going to have a salted caramel ice chip. This is one of my favorite flavors.